The time the Brown family learned the truth had come. In the cold outside the courthouse, the winter air bit sharply at the flesh of anyone brave enough to stand in the line of spectators. Still, nobody moved. From morning till now, the crowd had waited, muffled in scarves and coats, each determined to be able to tell others that they had seen it for themselves. This was no common trial. This was Kody Brown's trial. The man whose non-traditional family had captivated, polarized, and amused millions for years. Hey everyone, it's Anya, and welcome back to Reality Recap. The great stone edifice towered above, its broad staircase frosted with the day's chill. The top double doors remained firmly shut for the time being, but every camera eye, every microphone of news reporters, and every interested stare were fixed upon them. Behind them, something was about to happen that would make history. Exactly at 9:27 a.m., a wave of excitement swept through the throng like a ripple. Phones flew into the air, camera flashes blinked in quick succession. The doors swung open. Out first came the lawyers, creased suits, gleaming leather briefcases, and expressionless faces. They moved around the newsmen with precise smoothness, saying nothing. And then the moment of truth arrived. Kody Brown made his appearance, clad in a charcoal gray suit, hair slicked back in his telltale blonde color, but the tension in his jaw was apparent. His eyes swept the ocean of turmoil for a moment before focusing forward. He held in his right hand a thin folder. Evidence, maybe? His left arm wrapped tightly around Robyn's. Robyn Brown appeared as if sleep had not come her way for weeks. Wide eyes showed a mixture of fear and resolve. A dark green parka was wrapped around her, her hair streaming down her back, and a small handbag clutched in her spare hand with such force that the knuckles on her hand were white. Step by step, they made their way down the courthouse steps with careful deliberation. Camera shutters clicked deafeningly now, accompanied by shouted questions from the press. Kody, are the charges true? Robyn, did you have knowledge of the missing money? Is this it for the Brown family? Neither replied. They didn't need to. Robyn's bent head and Kody's pressed lips into a thin, unreadable line told more than words ever could. Within, the courtroom was already full. Family members, friends, local news reporters, and a handful of fortunate bystanders who had managed to find seats. The atmosphere was thick, not just with expectation, but with the odd, electric quiet of the moments leading up to a thunderstorm. Christine sat in the first row, her spine straight, her hands crossed in her lap. There was no doubt about the glint in her eyes, a combination of confidence and years-long vindication. She was dressed in a navy blue dress and had simply styled her hair, as if to proclaim, I didn't come here to impress. I came here to be heard. Next to her sat Janelle. While Christine had seemed anxious, she didn't. She seemed exhausted, in a sense that went far beyond mere physical weariness. She smiled weakly, tight-lipped, when Christine whispered something to her, but her gaze remained riveted on the front of the room. A couple of rows in the back, half in shadow, was Meri. She was sitting slightly slumped, as if she hoped not to be seen. Yet people did see her. They all wondered the same thing in silence. On whose side was she? The voice of the bailiff sliced through the mumblings. All rise. They all rose as the judge came in. A tall woman with prominent cheekbones and intense eyes, her black robe swept back from her as she took her seat at the bench, setting down a fat stack of files precisely in front of her. You may sit down, she said smoothly but firmly. Once the room was settled, she scanned down at her papers, then up at the people sitting before her. This court is now in session for the case of Brown versus Brown, she declared. A case of money arguments, property settlements, and claims of misconduct. The words hung in the air like smoke. Money arguments, allegations. For the first time, the Brown family's problems were no longer hinted at in online chatter or blazed across reality TV headlines. They were being spoken out loud in a courtroom, written into the official record. Kody sat next to his attorney, his fists locked in front of him. His expression revealed nothing. No smile, no scowl, just a stone wall. Robyn sat to his right, her eyes fixed on the table as though not looking anyone in the eye would render her invisible. Next to her, Christine leaned forward toward her attorney, speaking softly and receiving a whispered nod. Janelle looked at Christine, then at the judge, as if carefully measuring each word before she uttered them. The judge scanned the room again. "I will remind everyone here," she told them, "that this is a court of law. I demand order. I demand respect. This is not a TV studio. There will be no interruptions, no shouting outbursts, and no comment from the gallery. Do you all understand?" The judge's words were repeated, and a soft murmur ran through the room. Christine's attorney was the first to stand, a lanky man with silver hair and a voice that rang well. "Your Honor," he started, "my client spent close to 3 decades of her life with this family. She constructed a home, had children, and made financial and emotional contributions, and when she finally made the anguished choice to depart, she was left with nothing. No property, no savings, no equitable share of the assets she helped build." Kody shifted uncomfortably in his seat but remained quiet, Robyn's hands clenched in her lap. "And she's not alone," the lawyer went on. "Other members of this family have tales to share as well. This case is not motivated by anger, Your Honor. It is about equity. It is about the truth." The judge nodded slightly, making a quick note on her legal pad. In the back row, a reporter scribbled away, and another woman adjusted her camera lens to get a better shot of Christine's face. When he was done, the judge turned to Kody's table. "Mr. Brown, does your counsel wish to respond?" Kody's attorney stood up, a bespectacled man in his late 20s with a slight rod to his posture and a voice polite but laced with stubbornness. "Yes, Your Honor. We will demonstrate these charges to be overstated and, in a few instances, completely false. Mr. Brown has ever acted in the best interests of his family and in accord with the law. This matter is merely an effort to distort the truth for personal enrichment." Kody only then glanced up, meeting Christine's gaze. For a suspended, almost endless second, the whole room contracted around them. No words were exchanged, but the silent communication was thunderous. The judge sat up straight. "Very well. We will go to testimony. But let me be crystal clear. This court will not accept theatrics. We are here for facts, not feelings." Her gavel cracked sharply, officially opening the fight. The echoes still hung in the air when Christine's lawyer stood up once more, his attitude nearly that of a man already assured of his superiority. The room was filled with the soft rustling of papers and hushed whispers, but the moment he spoke, quiet descended. "Your Honor," he stated calmly, but there was an edge of steel in his voice, "my client gave almost 3 decades to the Brown family. She was more than a wife. She was a builder, a caretaker, and a financial contributor to their prosperity. And when she left, she had nothing. No assets, no savings, no equitable share of what she helped them build." Christine sat stiffly beside him, staring straight ahead. Nevertheless, a flash of feeling crossed her face. She'd replayed this moment in her mind thousands of times, but it was denser than she'd anticipated. The lawyer walked to the bench with a thick folder of papers. "These are accounts of her financial donations throughout the years, payments from her income into shared accounts, invoices for domestic expenses she paid. And yet, there is nothing showing those monies were refunded when she departed." Kody shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his jaw clenched, fingers drumming a slow rhythm on the table. Robyn looked back and forth between him and the lawyer, her lips thin and strained in a tight line. "This is not about resentment," the lawyer pressed on. "This is about justice. And the law is clear. When assets are built together, they must be divided equally. My client isn't asking for more than she deserves. She's asking for what is rightfully hers." A faint buzz swept through the gallery. Christine's lawyer turned slightly, gesturing toward the other side of the room. "And she is not alone. Janelle Brown's case uncovers a pattern." Janelle's lawyer, a calm woman in a blue suit, stood up to address the court. "Your Honor, my client invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in family properties and joint ventures, thinking those investments were for the benefit of all the family. But today, those properties belong only to Mr. Brown and Mrs. Robyn Brown, with no recognition or return of her investment." Kody leaned toward his lawyer, whispering hastily. A few stray words caught on nearby microphones. "That's not how it happened. They're twisting it." Janelle's lawyer moved over to the evidence table, spreading out a number of documents before the judge. These bank records indicate my client's personal money being placed in accounts under the name of Mr. Brown. There are no records of repayment, no contracts, no agreements in writing, just trust, and that trust has been violated. Christine and Janelle shared a brief look, the unspoken, knowing glance of two individuals who had battled the same war. The judge put on her glasses, looking to Kody's attorney. "Counsel, your response?" He stood up, adjusting his suit jacket, his voice measured and composed. "Your Honor, these allegations are at best deceptive. Mr. Brown has always looked out for the best interest of his family. Any money the plaintiffs donated was free will, offered to the household with no hope of reimbursement, because there was nothing to repay. This was a family, not a business deal." He stopped, allowing his words to sink in before he went on. "Actually, a great deal of the financial load over the years was shouldered personally by Mr. Brown. He gave up both personal earnings and time to care for his wives and children. Any imputation that he used them is not justified." Christine's head inclined a fraction, her eyes compressing. These were objections she had heard countless times before, objections that framed her sacrifices as charity bestowed instead of partnership granted. The lawyer continued. "In addition, the property in question was never owned jointly legally. It was kept solely in Mr. Brown's name for practical reasons, as is the case with large families, even though it was always understood to belong jointly. Everyone knew this was no secret." A whisper, gentle but sharp, shattered the silence. "Understanding doesn't make it fair." Christine spoke, just loud enough for reporters around her to hear. The judge's gaze snapped in her direction. "Mrs. Brown, you will be silent unless spoken to by the court." Christine relaxed back, her expression tranquil once more, though her hands crimped the tabletop tightly. Robyn adjusted uneasily in her seat. She hadn't said a word yet, but her body language spoke volumes. Arms tightly crossed, shoulders bunched, and the minute head shake every time the other lawyer spoke. She well knew the cameras were recording each gesture. Then Christine's lawyer landed his next blow. "Your Honor, we will introduce proof of huge withdrawals, hundreds of thousands of dollars, out of family accounts in the months prior to my client's departure. The money was transferred into accounts held exclusively by Mr. Brown and Mrs. Robyn Brown." The tension in the room immediately became palpable. Gasps and whispers rippled like wildfire, and even the judge sat forward a little. Kody's head jerked around to face Christine's attorney. "That's a gross misrepresentation of events," he retorted, his voice breaking the judge's previous warning. The gavel came down hard. "Mr. Brown, you will not speak out of turn in my courtroom. Do you understand?" Kody leaned back, his breathing sharper now. "Yes, Your Honor," he muttered through gritted teeth. But the harm was accomplished. The tantrum had only served to make him look defensive, and, in the court of public opinion, defensive tended to look very much like guilty. Christine's attorney continued in his pursuit. "These transactions, Your Honor, coincide with prominent family disagreements, disputes over property distribution, and my client's growing concerns about fiscal disclosure. We believe this is evidence of a concerted effort to transfer funds before they could be divided fairly." Robyn's face went deep red. She leaned over Kody, speaking softly. He nodded once, eyes fixed on the table. The judge's eyes traveled between the two sides, unreading. "This court will examine each and every financial document presented. Until that time, I will make no conclusions, but I will warn all concerned parties on failure to produce documents or giving incomplete answers will have harsh repercussions." Both sides of the legal team nodded, but tension hung in the air. By now, onlookers were sitting forward in their seats. This was not simply a legal case, it was the public unraveling of a family that had once sold itself as a cohesive unit. Every look, every whispered word, every tense flicker between Christine, Janelle, Kody, and Robyn felt like another line in an unwritten history. And it was only just starting. The room waited with bated breath for the next punch. Christine's lawyer, unfazed, had already dropped the accusation of hundreds of thousands of dollars being diverted into Kody and Robyn's personal accounts. Before that ripple had even dissipated, he was ready with his next move. "Your Honor," he said evenly, though there was weight behind his voice, At this time, I'd like to submit into evidence a set of documents detailing these transactions. From his briefcase, he pulled a large binder, snapping its metal rings shut with a sound that cracked through the silence. Inside were dozens of pages, bank statements, emails, receipts. The clerk took them to the bench. Pieces of paper slid along the fine wood, each thud a beat on the hushed courtroom. "These are verified financial records," the lawyer explained. "They clearly reveal a pattern of withdrawals and transfers from joint family accounts into private accounts belonging exclusively to Mr. Brown and Mrs. Robyn Brown. And these were not small amounts. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars at a time." The judge leafed through the first few pages, her brow knitting as she absorbed the figures. Everyone else in the gallery leaned forward, trying to catch a peek at the numbers. Kody's face turned a furious red from behind the defense table. He jerked upright, pulling at Histy in a sharp, abrupt motion. Robyn locked up completely, her eyes fixed on the binder like it was a bomb about to detonate. Christine's gaze remained front, her shoulders relaxed, but her fingers were so tangled in her lap that they had turned white at the knuckles. The lawyer wasn't done. He moved to the bench, another folder under his arm. And along with these financial records, we also have copies of emails between Mr. Brown and a financial planner. In them, there is mention of liquidating joint assets before the official breakup talks had run their course. A collective gasp cut through the courtroom like a knife. This was no longer about money gone missing, it was about intent. Robyn's head shook, her body leaning forward towards Kody as she spoke in a hasty whisper. Her lips moved quickly, but the microphones were unable to pick up what she said. Kody nodded stiffly, his jaw clenching even tighter. Finally, his control snapped. "This is totally out of context!" Kody exclaimed, his voice louder than he intended. The judge's gavel came down forcefully. "Mr. Brown, I warned you, another disruption, and you will be removed from this courtroom." The scolding left a thick, heavy silence. Witnesses fidgeted uncomfortably in the stand. Christine's lawyer took advantage of the silence. "Your Honor, when these emails are viewed alongside the bank transfers, the context becomes unmistakable. The timeline matches perfectly. This is not speculation, it is documented fact. And the question it raises is critical. Were these actions intended to prevent my client and others from receiving what they were rightfully owed?" He turned then, his gaze fixed like a spotlight on the defense table. "The numbers do not lie." The judge put the binder aside, her gaze directly at Kody's lawyer. "Counsel, how do you defend these transactions?" Kody's attorney rose, apparently anticipating the test. "Yes, Your Honor. These were not concealed transfers. The accounts were always in my client's control, and the funds were transferred for valid reasons, to pay for future expenses on family-related projects and commitments. Any suggestion of impropriety is unfounded." But the reason dangled, taut as an overstretched thread. Christine's lawyer moved forward once more, holding up a single sheet of paper. "If that is indeed the case, then why does Mr. Brown, in this email, specifically pen," he hesitated, and I quote, "We need to get this done before they start asking questions." There were murmurs. The gavel of the judge struck once again. Order in the court. The lawyer for Kody had a quick interruption. That is quoted out of context. Christine's attorney interrupted him. Then play the entire message. This is the whole email. He started to read, every word cutting through the electric air. The suggestion was impossible to ignore. The timing, the secrecy, the hurry before inquiries could be made. Christine took a measured breath, as if laying down a burden she'd carried for decades. Janelle's eyes flicked between the lawyers, her mouth pursed into a tight line, but a slight nod acknowledged her silent assent. The truth was rising. Then there was a surprise move that nobody expected. "Your Honor," Christine's lawyer said, "we call a surprise witness who is in a position to comment on how these funds were handled." Heads turned, reporters craned to get a better look. The bailiff opened the side door, and in walked a middle-aged man in a dark suit, a folder under his arm. "This is the family's former accountant," the lawyer announced. "He oversaw and monitored the joint accounts for years." Kody's attorney shot to his feet. "Your Honor, this witness was not disclosed on the original list." The judge lifted a hand. "I will allow it. Proceed." The accountant took the oath and settled into the stand. His voice was steady, professional, but his words landed like a hammer. "I knew these transfers. I warned Mr. Brown then that taking these funds without all parties' approval could result in legal issues. My advice was ignored." Kody's fingers balled into fists on the table. The accountant went on. "When I asked for complete documentation of the reason for the withdrawals, Mr. Brown said it was family affairs and not anyone else's business." The air grew even more tense. Christine's lawyer shifted forward. "On your professional evaluation, were these transfers in accordance with open financial practice in a joint asset structure?" The accountant paused for only an instant. "No, not by any means." The sentence dropped like a stone into stagnant water, producing ripples throughout the room. Meri, who sat in the back, squirmed in her seat. She stared hard at her lap, refusing to meet Christine's eye. The judge sat back in her chair, drumming her pen against her papers. "This testimony will be considered along with all the financial testimony. A decision will only be rendered after due consideration. But what I heard today is troubling, to say the least, regarding transparency and fairness." The gavel came down. "This court is in recess until tomorrow morning." As individuals stood up, the air snapped. Reporters hurried towards the doors, headlines already being written. Kody Brown charged with covert transfers. Surprise witness testifies against Brown. Family scandal breaks out in court. Christine stood up slowly, taking her papers. Janelle brushed her arm en route. Not a hug, not a smile, just a nod. Kody and Robyn hastily departed, dodging questions from reporters, but the tension in their stance and the rigidity of their expressions spoke louder than any words ever could. And as camera shutters clicked outside, it was apparent this was no longer just a family fight. This was Perrin. Within, the air was tension-charged, electric, so thick with expectation that even the benches and heavy drapes seemed to feel it. Each individual in attendance, from the bailiff's stone visage near the double doors to the smallest presence in the last row, breathed not a single word in group-wide suspense. The judge, poised to issue his next critical decision, allowed his gavel to rest in hand like an unspoken guarantee of finality. On the left side of the room, Kody Brown was stiff in his chair, knuckles locked white from having held the table edge too tightly. His eyes flashed to Robyn, sitting beside him, her face calm, but barely so. Underneath that serenity, the turmoil of emotions was clear in her tightly pursed lips, eyes darting away from the opposite table where Christine sat straight, head held high, exuding calm strength in spite of the pain etched deeply within her eyes. This was more than a court fight. It was the culmination of years of broken trust, silent tears, and the gradual disintegration of a family that had once seemed invincible. The judge's authoritative but measured voice sliced through the silence, recounting the evidence, the testimony, and events bare over the weeks. Every sentence had the force of a hammer to stone, preventing it from being pretended that this was an ordinary day in court. This was the day decisions would be made that would change lives. And although the judge's words had echoed of fair shares and good orders in the detached tone of the law, the mood in the room conveyed another story, of love turned bitter, of loyalty violated, and the bitter aftertaste of liberty which sometimes comes too late after releasing one's hold on something that once was treasured. Christine's attorney leaned forward, firm but calm, reminding the court of the years of sacrifice her client had made, the emotional work, the raising of children, the quiet acceptance of public scrutiny, all in a bid to maintain the illusion of togetherness that had been dissolving at its foundation for years. Robyn fidgeted uncomfortably as her own attorney replied, talking of consent and decisions made for the sake of the family, a story that now sounded hollow, resonating like an empty promise in the cavernous courtroom. When the judge directly interrogated Kody, his responses came in staccato bursts, but his eyes betrayed streaks of annoyance and resentment, feelings which had probably been building over years. Christine's poise never deviated, however her heart thudded with every tick of legal interaction, every utterance a further cut from the existence she previously knew. Spectators leaned forward, irresistibly drawn to the human drama unfolding before them. Soft murmurs floated like moths to a flame, only to be extinguished by a bailiff's quick glance. This was no gossip spot. It was a spot where verdicts were hammered into immortality, where the strike of a gavel could change the things. The judge's eyes scanned the room. Silence hung, hearts pounded, palms were damp, breaths caught, until finally he spoke once more, not just as a judge but as a human being recognizing the emotional burden in the room. He reminded everyone that, no matter what the verdict was, the shadow of this day would remain, in their lives and in the eyes of the public that had witnessed. Their tale was no longer a secret. No, it was a warning, part of common memory. When the gavel finally fell, the smack was sharp and irrevocable, resonating through the courtroom like a clap of thunder, ordaining conclusions bickered over for weeks. Christine assembled her documents with slow deliberation. Her steps were peaceful, her breath soft. Not happiness, but release. This brutal chapter was coming to an end. Kody sat for a moment longer, gaze far away, maybe deciding what to do next, maybe grappling with the reality that there are some things that cannot be controlled. Robyn sat with her eyes on the floor, her hands folded tightly in her lap as if staying together was the only thing keeping her from falling apart publicly. The judge stood up and vanished through the side door. The hum of the room returned as chairs scraped on the polished floor and people got up. Reporters adjusted lenses, ready to capture those last glints of naked humanity before the principal actors vanished into other lives. Outside the court building, sun-drenched late afternoon poured across the steps, blindingly bright, a discordant contrast to the pale shadows that had been left behind within, since Christine moved down them without once looking back. Her pace did not falter, but behind her, Kody and Robyn walked more slowly. Their distance was greater than that of a mere space. It was a gulf cut by decisions taken, love lost, and the irremediable truths revealed in that hallowed room where, not many hours before, they had all sat together, tied, if briefly, by the chill, unforgiving mandates of the court. The courtroom had been heavy with expectation. Air itself appeared to be heavy, as if the oxygen contained months' worth of argument, proof, and feeling. Wooden walling panels shone under the overhead lights, their smooth faces reflecting shards of tense faces and agitated hands. From back row to front row, the benches were filled, family, journalists taking notes, and strangers who had tracked the case like a serialized television drama. It had dragged on for weeks, but today was the day everyone had been waiting for, the verdict. Everyone in the room knew that when that gavel came down for the final time, lives would be changed forever. On the defense table, Kody Brown had on a black fitted suit. His hands were clasped tightly together until his knuckles turned white. His lawyer, an angular man with a calculating gaze, leaned in close to him, speaking in hushed tones. Kody nodded stiffly, his eyes trained on the jury box. Next to him, the seat where Robyn Brown had sat patiently through the trial now stood noticeably vacant, her absence another shadow in the room. Across the aisle, the prosecution team sat tight-lipped and unyielding. Their chief attorney, a woman who was meticulous to a fault, clicked her pen once against her papers before laying it down with precision. Every question she had posed throughout the trial had been like a scalpel, and now even she seemed to be drawing breath. Judge Harrison Whitmore came through the side entrance, a man whose white hair was a stark contrast to his straight, near-youthful stance. His black robes whispered across the floor as he ascended the bench. Taking seat, he swept the room with a calculated look, then brought down his gavel once, not hard, but with enough force to crack stray thoughts back into focus. "Court is in session," he stated, his flat voice showing no sign of prejudice. "We are here today to hear the reading of the verdict in the State v. Kody Brown case. Jury, have you arrived at a unanimous verdict?" The foreperson of the jury, a gray-haired middle-aged woman with an unwavering, unshakable eye and a serious look, stood up. She held in her hand a folded sheet of paper as if it was burdened with 1,000 weights. "Yes, Your Honor, we have." Judge Whitmore nodded. "Give the verdict form to the bailiff." The bailiff, who was a tall man with a purposeful step, accepted the paper and handed it to the judge. The room became quiet except for the gentle movement of clothing as individuals shifted in their seats. The judge unfolded the paper, reading it in silence. His face was calm, although a subtle tightening at the edges of his eyes betrayed the seriousness of what he read. "Will the defendant rise, please?" Kody's chair creaked as he rose, his actions slow, unhuman. His breathing remained even, but his eyes danced with fear, rebelliousness, and something that could have been remorse. His lawyer stood beside him, shoulders set. In the case of the state versus Kody Brown, the judge read, "On the charge of fraud, the jury finds the defendant guilty." A wave of noise rolled over the courtroom. A gasp and "oh my God" stifled by mouth, snuffed out by the judge's quick, reproving look. Kody's jaw clenched and his face went white. For the first time, his eyes dropped from the jury to the floorboards at his feet, as if they would abruptly open up and engulf him whole. The judge went on, "On the charge of obstruction of justice, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty." This time the response was greater, more difficult to hold in. A handful of reporters wrote madly, the scratch of their pens barely penetrating the taut silence. Kody's attorney laid a stabilizing hand on his arm, but it appeared to have little effect. The man who had begun the day entering the courtroom with controlled poise now stood as if pinned in the eye of an approaching hurricane. At last, the judge read the final charge. "On the charge of conspiracy, the jury finds the defendant guilty." The words fell like the impact of a hammer's last strike. This was not partial justice. It was total condemnation. Judge Whitmore placed the verdict sheet on the bench and folded it in two. "The court thanks the jury for their service. 1 week from today, sentencing will be held." He waited for a moment, then continued. "In light of the convictions, the defendant is remanded to custody, effective immediately." 2 policemen moved forward behind Kody. The cold metallic snap of handcuffs reverberated in the silence. Kody winced but did not resist. His gaze darted to the public gallery, where Christine Brown was seated in the second row. Her face was inscrutable. Not ecstatic, not sad, only motionless, as though she had waited all those years for this particular moment to come. Next to her, Janelle Brown leaned forward, lips clamped in a tight line, her eyes watching every twitch. The drama between the Browns had lasted years, but this was not about past animosity. It was about seeing the inevitable take hold. Robyn Brown crept in from behind, her presence at first unobserved. Her eyes were red from crying, her gait hesitant. When she took in the sight of the cuffs around Kody's wrists, a sob escaped her. She stepped forward as if to reach him, but an officer held up a hand. "Kody," she breathed, her voice shaking. He cocked his head, just enough to glance at her for a moment. No smile, no nod, just a dense, unspoken nod. Judge Whitmore brought the gavel down once more. "Court is adjourned." The sound echoed, final, irrevocable. Movement rippled around the room. There were those who slipped away slowly, some in a hurry, such as water flowing free after the breakdown of a dam. As Kody was escorted toward the side entrance, the press rushed ahead, cameras flashing, voices calling out questions that bounced off the walls. "Mr. Brown, do you have anything to say? Do you still insist you're innocent? What would you like to say to your family?" He offered no response. His attorney, lagging behind, grumbled no comment under his breath before the two disappeared into the gears of the justice system. In the courtroom gallery, Christine and Janelle shared a brief glance, not one of triumph, but of comprehension. The trial had been open to the public, but the punishment was intensely personal. Promises had been made and unkept, and now the responsibility fell squarely on Kody's shoulders. Robyn sat for a long time after the rest had left, gazing at the vacant seat Kody had just vacated. Her hold on her purse, as if it were the sole connection to reality, tightened. Her tears had stopped, but her breathing remained unsteady. After a while, she got up and eased out unnoticed, sidestepping the reporters hanging around the door. Outside, the courthouse stairs were a whirlwind of activity. News trucks, microphones, cameras, and a crowd of people. Some had arrived for the story, others for the show, and others simply to see history unfold. The verdict would be splashed across headlines for weeks, parsed by pundits and debated by strangers on the internet. But to those at the center, the commotion outside did not matter. The choices had been made, the gavel had dropped, and with its reverberation, the world Kody Brown was familiar with was lost forever.